Welcome to this episode of the Common Cultures Podcast. I'm your host, Simon Eisenbach, and I'm here with our guest today, Puck. And I actually realized this morning that I don't know your last name.
It's Lewis. Puck
right.
Lewis.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Puck is a barber, Navy veteran, all-around fascinating human. Take a couple sentences and describe yourself.
Prior veteran, as he said. I was a chef for 20 years. Baker, biker.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, baker, biker, beautician, barber. I've just enjoyed traveling the country doing work because I know I can use any of my careers in any state and still find a job and be able to travel.
That's true. I start off every episode with this. How would you define sustainability?
Sustainability, sort of meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs.
Okay.
That was a quote from, I'm trying to remember who it was, some Ukrainian prime minister from many years ago. But within my current career as a barber, I think barbering has been an integral part of the community. Like in ancient Egypt, barbers were seen to be almost equal to priests, as hair was thought to be tied to the powers bestowed upon the pharaohs by gods.
Interesting.
In more modern history, barbers were also surgeons and dentists.
I also feel like it's a central part of any community.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone, the barber knows everyone, I feel like, especially in small towns.
Right. I mean, you can find, as you're in high school and college, it's not who you know, it's what you know. And then as you graduate college, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Totally.
And then as you get past that a little bit further, it's if you have a guy.
Yeah.
Do you have a guy for that?
Yep.
Do you have a concrete guy? Do you have a plumber guy?
Dude,
do you have a construction? Do you have a mechanic? Do you have a guy? And in this industry, we meet a ton of guys.
Yes.
Just a ton of people that have a thing. So if you say, I've been having these issues, oh, I know a guy.
Yeah.
Let me get you his number. Let me see if I can give you his number.
That's a fascinating point.
So in this career, it's meeting those people to help other people in the community just by sharing
so you're basically a
of a
community
person.
Connector.
Yeah, exactly.
While also doing your job.
Right. Plus, and then you look back into, you watch a ton of old movies, even in Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
He's running into the train or the hobby store to buy new trains, and the barber is sitting outside of his barbershop waiting for somebody to come in.
Yeah.
But he's also talking.
Yeah.
I used to go to the barbershop with my dad when I was a kid, and it was full of guys that were just hanging out.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there. They're having
their
morning coffee.
Common, especially in small towns.
Right.
I know that being in a bigger city, which Salt Lake's not really that big, but it's still bigger.
Right.
It doesn't happen as often because of hustle and bustle, but yeah.
But even still, at the shop I'm at, before we started doing reservations, people would walk in and then sit around and wait.
Yeah.
And so you would, most of the time, some people would talk to each other.
Yeah.
And just, hey, I've seen you here before,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's talk, or you're dressed in a suit, or I heard you talking about blank.
Yeah.
It's building a community within the community.
So how would you define community?
Totally. So, in biology, community is an interactive group of various species in a common location. Flora, fauna, animals, all contributing to the environment.
Yeah.
So similarly, in a barbershop, we are all sorts of different types of people.
100%.
We have different musical tastes, clothing styles, attitudes, attributes, hairstyles, and we're all coming together within the shop for the betterment of the barber community. As if there's a rift, if there's a fight, if there's just something people don't get along, everybody sort of spares away from either a particular person, or they don't want to share their personal knowledge or gain friendships within the barbershop because it could be
used against them
from someone else.
Totally.
So if we all work together, it builds the community within the shop, but also helps build
I also feel like you guys are a little different, and this is a slight tangent, because you guys are, from what I've seen, are more of like a having employees that you're paying versus other barbershops I know where it's like you rent my booth.
Yeah.
Which is a very different business model, and I feel like that also makes people feel more appreciated, having the ability to have like retirement or insurance options and like things like that.
Oh, absolutely. There's not a lot of barbershops that offer benefits. We did for a really, really long time until insurance premiums recently went up.
Yeah.
But we offer a lot of things that other barbershops don't, like paid time off, and you get your birthday off paid.
That's sick.
There's just so many things that the barbershop offers. Plus, you don't have to worry whether or not people are going to come in that month on whether or not you get paid.
Totally.
We offer commission or hourly.
Yeah.
But even if you do one haircut an hour, you make more than hourly.
That's
But it's very rare that we don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with our shop being employees versus booth rent, it's everybody gets the opportunity to sort of take ownership, not just of their chair, but over the whole shop. We want the whole shop to look good.
Yeah.
So we don't just clean our station, we clean everything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We build up the barbers within our location because there's a ton of people that come in and just request anybody.
Yeah.
They don't care who they get a haircut from because they know they're going to get a good haircut.
Totally.
No matter who they go to.
Totally.
So it just helps the barber sort of, like I said, take ownership over the whole shop, not just their chair.
So what does your ideal, like what would a sustainable community look like to you in an ideal world?
So I think a sustainable community for within the barber community means learning not just from those with years of experience, but also learning from the new barbers.
Yeah.
Trends are constantly changing. So if we're taking time to get to know new ways to do the same thing that we've been doing for years, it can make us faster, it can make us more efficient. But with the trends changing, we can build new habits, we can learn from beginners, and if we don't, we're sort of stuck in the past.
What about for you outside the barbering world? Because I know you do a lot of other things.
Yeah. A sustainable community outside of my occupation, with my volunteer work that I do, I work with a nonprofit that helps abused kids. Sort of just opens your eyes to what's happening outside and getting to experience, whether you want to or not, the problems that there are within the community. I live in a really small town, and I hear a ton of people when they start working with the organization that they never thought that there would be that much child abuse within our small town, because we just don't think of small towns that way.
Yeah.
But now, comparatively to larger towns, of course, child abuse and things are happening everywhere.
Totally.
And there is more in a larger town, but we never expect to see it in a small town because it's a small town community. Everybody watches out for everybody.
There's that oldest adage of like small town family situation.
Right.
But also
how we take care of our neighbors.
Exactly.
But I've been living in my neighborhood for 2.5 years, and I have no idea who my neighbors are.
Yeah.
That's
fascinating because I've lived here for a similar amount of time, and I know 70% of my street.
Right. You're
also more in like a suburban area.
Right. It's a really small suburban area, and they call Twilla a bedroom community where people go there to sleep and then they leave.
That makes sense.
So, a lot of the people that live out in Twilla work in Salt Lake. They work in surrounding bigger cities, and it's just a whole lot cheaper to buy a home in Twilla than it is in Salt Lake.
Yes.
So a ton of people don't mind spending $200 to $300 a month in gas when they're saving $2,000 a month on their mortgage.
Totally. That makes sense.
So it's, for a lot of people it's worth it, but also living in a small community, we need to expect that people are going to try to hide things.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like it's a bad community.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, the sustainable community outside is really just looking out for your people, whether you know them or not.
Yeah.
I was reading an article this morning about homelessness in Utah and how worse it's getting.
Yeah.
But yet,
housing prices going up.
Housing prices are going up. Interest rates are going up, and they're only going up.
Yeah.
And
there's no sort of relief.
Right. And even if interest rates go down, housing prices are still going to go up.
Right.
So homelessness is getting worse, poverty is getting worse, yet we can't seem to find a way to fix it.
Yeah.
So taking care of your neighbors, take care of your community.
Yeah.
Even helping one person a day or smiling at one person a day will change the attitude of 100 people.
That is a drastically small thing that can heavily impact someone's day.
Right.
Were you born and raised in Tooele?
I was born and raised out there. I lived there, I think it was about 7. We moved to Texas for a year, and then we moved to Arizona for a year, and then we moved back here.
What stemmed the moves?
My dad's work.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we went on a vacation to visit family, and someone in the family said, "Oh, hey, this place is hiring." So my dad honestly went and applied while we were on vacation.
That's wild.
Yeah. And got a job offer. So we went back home. A few months later, we moved. Same thing when we moved from Texas to Arizona. We went to visit family.
Wild.
Someone's hiring. My dad said, "Let's try it out." Went and filled out an application. And then same thing moving back here. We came back here to visit my grandmother, and my dad ran into one of his old coworkers and said they're hiring for the promotion that you were going for.
Yeah.
So my dad applied. We moved back.
Wild.
But it was really weird, especially being a kid, going from being in the majority, middle class white kid of a certain religion, to being the minority. Especially when we moved to Texas, we were sort of out by Austin. It was a really rural farming community. And
what town were you in?
It was called Round Rock.
Okay, I know Round Rock.
Yeah.
So I built my camper van near Round Rock.
Okay.
I forget the exact town.
Right.
But it was a little bit south of Round Rock, like south of Taylor. I had to go to the Taylor Home Depot.
Yeah. So it was really weird because I went from being in the majority to being a minority. My school was a dual immersion school. They taught everything in Spanish first and then translated into English.
Oh, that's wild.
So yeah.
Coming from Utah, that was probably a massive culture shift.
And we didn't have Spanish classes in elementary school.
Yeah.
So
because you said you were 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
About 7, and then when we were 8, we moved to Texas or to Arizona. Very similar. We were in a and while moving to Texas, we were going from being Mormon to being in a Christian evangelical community.
Yeah.
And my mom says we went grocery shopping right after we moved there, and she wrote a check because that's what you did back then in '87. And the lady looked at the address, and it was a Utah address, and she said to my mom, "So are you a Yankee or are you a damn Yankee?" And my mom was like, "I don't know what that means."
Ah, that's hilarious.
And it was.
So were you guys still Mormon when you guys moved? Like, did you guys stay in the LDS
Yeah, we
church?
stayed in Mormon church. It was really weird too because we had to drive like an hour and a half to go to church.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was in people's homes.
Yeah,
they didn't have a ward house. They didn't have a church house in our community. So we would go to the community center. We would go to people's houses and have church in their home.
Yeah.
'Cause they just didn't have, it was huge back then, but it wasn't as big as it is now.
So you went from essentially being like a part of a like full-fledged community to like a tiny community.
Very, very tiny community.
Interesting.
We had maybe 3 people in our elementary school that were Mormon.
Wow.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And now, it's the opposite everywhere else here in Utah. Same thing in Arizona. There was hardly any Mormon churches in the area.
Yeah. So. I knew approximately how deep it was here, but I did not realize just how many LDS churches there are.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in Salt Lake. It's literally like every 2 blocks.
It's that and the 7-Elevens and soda places now. They're competing to who can have the most real estate. And
it's comical.
It's ridiculous. You can literally drive 2 blocks and see another church.
Yeah. It's almost like I lived in Taiwan for a minute, and there was always a joke that you could stand on like every 4 street corners and see 2 7-Elevens and 2 Starbucks.
Oh yeah.
And it's like the same thing here.
When I lived in Seattle, there were numerous corners that had Starbucks on opposing corners.
Yeah.
One's on the northwest side, and the other one's on the southeast corner. And,
wild.
And then on the other 2 corners was a Pete's and a, mom and pop coffee shop.
About Pete's.
It's they're just everywhere. You can't walk. But that is one thing that I loved about Seattle is that I could be walking down the street and my coffee cup is empty, and I can just literally
turn,
and there's one. I don't have to walk far to get more coffee.
That makes sense.
At all.
Now, so you graduated high school in Utah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep, graduated out in Tooele.
Did you go to college after, or did you go straight into military?
So I went to college for a year and a half. After high school, I went up to Utah State in Logan.
Okay.
And that's where I realized that conventional schooling wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Sitting in a classroom with 400 other people discussing something that has nothing to do with your field of study was a waste of time.
Yeah.
So I was 6 credits shy of my associate's degree and quit.
Got it.
I just don't want to do this anymore.
Got it.
So,
what were you going to school for?
At the time, I was going to school with a major in theater and a minor in education.
Okay.
I wanted to teach theater.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
And when you were in high school, were you also doing theater stuff?
Yeah, I was pretty big into theater when I was in high school. Did all of the plays and musicals in high school, and then some community theater also.
What was your favorite role you've ever played?
My favorite role I've ever played. Well, there's 2. One was in college. I was the voice of Audrey 2, the voice of the plant in Little Shop of Horrors.
Okay.
And then Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream.
All right.
Is quite possibly one of my favorite roles I've ever played, and in my opinion, one of the best roles written for English theater.
Nice.
It's just a really fun, whimsical, sort of naive. I know this is what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know if I'm doing it the right way.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Just a great role, played expertly by Stanley Tucci in the movie back in the late 90s. But yeah, Puck was probably one of my favorite roles that I've ever played.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's part of how I got my nickname.
Oh, okay. What is your legal name then?
Justin.
Okay.
Justin Lewis, yeah. Justin was a very popular name in the late 70s, early 80s. There were 6 Justins in my elementary school class. In my class, not my grade.
Oh.
Just in my class.
Oh, boy.
So we all had nicknames. I've had nicknames my entire life.
I mean,
or
I have to
go by our last name.
Hence the Mohawk in the summer.
Right.
There was so when I first got the Mohawk, I was working at a summer camp, and I went to get my paycheck one time, and the bookkeeper didn't know my real name.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in, and she was like, "Mo, I don't have a paycheck for you." I was like, "That's not my actual name."
Right.
And she was like, "I was wondering who Simon was."
Right. Yeah, it's even at work at the shop, there's a ton of people that don't. I mean, they know my real name, they just don't put it together.
Yeah.
Even jobs that I've had. I apply for a job and get hired. They're like, so we have 3 other Justins that work here. Do you have a nickname? And so I took my road name from the volunteer organization I work with and just stuck with it.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of Pucks out there.
No, it's not a very
not a very common name.
No. Awesome. And so after college, where did you go?
I wanted to go back to college to sort of go forward with my field of study, and I couldn't afford it. So I just moved back to Tooele and worked for a couple of years. And while I was working, I was doing peer educating. I was working with the special needs kids at Tooele High School, and the Armed Services Vocational and Battery Test for the military. They were doing it that day at the school, and I was walking through the hallway, and a Navy recruiter approached me, and we just started talking. And I told him, I had taken the ASVAB test when I was a junior in high school, and he just looked at me and he was like, "Well, how long ago was that?" I'm like, 3 years. And he was like, "How old are you?" And I'm like, I'm 20, I'm almost 21. And he's like, "And you're still in high school?" I'm like, no, I graduated. I work here," which was funny because I was wearing my staff vest at the time.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so I worked at the high school for about a year and a half, and then joined the Navy. I wanted to go back to school, and that was the only way that I could see that I could do it, would be use the Montgomery GI Bill.
That makes sense.
So it was June 18th of 2001. I flew to Chicago to go to boot camp, and 2.5 months later, 9/11 happened while I was still in boot camp.
Down.
It just, completely changed.
Yeah.
I knew that we were in some type of turmoil. I just didn't know how bad it was.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. has always been in some type of wartime scenario.
There's only been, I think, 14 years the U.S. has not been at war.
Since 1776. Yeah. Right. So I knew, I mean, this was also right after Desert Storm and Desert Eagle back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So in 2001, I thought, it's pretty clear, things are balancing back out. We're taking soldiers out, and then planes happened.
Yeah, that's...
So it just completely flipped my world.
And so, in the Navy, what realm did you go? Because there's a lot of different ways you can go.
Oh, totally. There's a lot of different things you can do. I actually started working as a cook when I was 14. And so when I enlisted at 21, I said I want to be a cook. I just want to cook.
Okay.
And they wanted me to be a nuclear engineer. They're like, your score is really high. You seem to be pretty smart. Why don't you do this?
That is vastly different.
Completely different. Completely different. And, I said, that sounds great, but I just want to be a cook. And they're like, look at all this money you can make. Look at all these things you can do when you get out. I said, that sounds great, but I just want to be a cook. And they said, okay, well, if you want to be a cook, then you should be on submarines. I said, okay. They said, if you want to be on submarines, then you should be on this type of submarine. And I said, okay. It wasn't until about 2 years later that I learned that the recruiters get bonuses if they hire or if they bring on or recruit nuclear trained personnel and submariners.
Got it.
But what was fun about that is the particular ship that I was stationed on, all three of the recruiters at the recruiting station that I signed up at were on that same submarine at one point in time.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Two of them served at the same time together. For about a year, and then the other one was on about 2 years after the next one got off. But all four of us were on the same ship at one point in time.
That's wild.
So yeah.
Did you ever chat with them about it after the fact?
Yeah, they had this thing when I was in the Navy called Hometown Area Recruiting Program, and basically you can take an extra week of leave and work in the recruiting office, and then take a week for leave.
Oh, that's cool.
So just about every year I would come home and do HARP duty. So I would take 2 weeks of leave.
Nice.
One of those weeks working, it was basically, filing, answering phones.
Yeah.
Working with the recruits that they had signed up that aren't leaving for boot camp yet. We would, do PT, we would, do military training. So I would work with them on that, and then just like I said, just answer questions to people that are enlisting.
Fascinating. Outside of your improving your cooking skills, what were some of the takeaways that you learned during your time in the military that you have used throughout the rest of your life?
A lot of that is basic respect for other people and for myself. I learned a ton about myself while I was in the Navy. How to be a better person. But I forget who said it. I believe it was Barack Obama said, I treat the janitor just the same way I treat the CEO.
Yeah.
And in the military, treat your seniors, treat the more senior the same way as the same way that you treat the people that are new, because you might need something from someone at any level.
Yeah. Well, when things go sideways.
Oh, I mean, especially, you've got to rely on everybody on the boat,
Ranks don't matter when you're in
right.
a
If there's a fire or a flood or a torpedo,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who it is. You're working right next to them.
Yeah.
But other great things that I learned in the military, I went to an EMT school.
Oh,
I worked with the doc on board. There's only one doctor on the submarine. There's about 160 people.
Fascinating.
And there's one doctor. So if there's a fire and there's an injured man in the fire, we're not sending that doctor into the fire to get the injured man.
Yeah, no.
So they train other people to do that.
That makes sense.
And I got put in charge of the EMAT team, the Emergency Medical Assist team. So they sent me to EMT school so I can work with the doc on a more knowledgeable basis.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. I don't use that now, as an EMT.
But I feel like, because I'm also wilderness first responder trained, having that sort of slightly elevated medical training, even if you're not working as that, helps you in so many situations that are just like everyday life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was a chef for 20 years and we get so many cuts and burns. Yeah, we know the basic understanding of how to stop that from bleeding or how to heal it. But when you have someone with training, you can go a little bit further. Same thing in the barbershop, with scissors and straight razors.
Yep.
Water on the floor. There's tons of things that we can use a more experienced level of knowledge in our field for emergency preparedness and emergency help.
Yeah, that makes sense. How long were you in the military in the end?
I just did 4 years. Okay. Sometimes I wish I would have stayed in, but most of the time I'm glad I got out when I did. But I also thought about it at the time. If I do 4 years, or if I do 8 years, I may as well do 10. Yep. If I do 10, I may as well do 20.
And be a career.
Right, and make it a career.
Yep.
I was looking at certain other types of advancement while I was in, and if I would have been advanced, I would have stayed in.
That makes sense.
There are just other opportunities would have come along that I would have taken and run with.
That makes sense.
So, but it didn't seem as if advancement was a possibility at the time, just through politics.
Yeah.
There's politics and everything.
Yep.
And it's even in ranking,
Totally.
and getting advanced in any job, not just the military, but that's even in civilian life.
Yep.
It's they take a lot of other things into consideration other than how well you do at your job as to who's getting promoted.
Totally. That's one of the realities of life.
Then it comes back to it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yep. And how well you know them. And yeah. So after you got out of the military, did you come back to Chuella? Was that when you went to Vegas?
Yeah, so I did move back to Utah for a couple of years. I was in Utah for about 6 months.
Okay.
Just until I could find a place and a job.
Totally.
Commuting to and from Tooele every day for work was a bit of a hassle, so I moved down to Salt Lake and was here for about a year and a half, and then I moved to Vegas. I attended culinary school and pastry school down there.
Sweet.
Lived in Vegas for about 3 years, working at many different restaurants and bakeries, and Vegas is depends on who you ask. Vegas is the culinary capital of the U.S., and there's just as many restaurants as there are coffee shops.
I would say Vegas and New York are on a more even plane than New York and any other city.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I actually find it fascinating that outside of New York, Vegas is like one of the highest rates of food shipments.
Oh, absolutely. In the US. Yep. Yep. And it's anything from exotic fruits to seafood.
Yeah.
I typically don't eat seafood in landlocked states, but I know that Vegas gets some really good stuff because of the amount of money that's put into food.
Well, and also the amount of people eating seafood there, it's not sitting.
Right.
That's one of the big things is like, it's getting flown in, but like, what's the frequency of that?
Right.
Like, is it every day like Vegas, or is it like every week like somewhere like Denver? Like,
yeah. Or even here in Salt Lake, one of my favorite brew houses, they only offer fish and chips on weekends.
Yeah.
Because they get their fish flown in Friday.
Oh, that's sweet.
And they'll do it until it's gone.
What place?
Hopkins Brew Pub.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't realize that was the reason why they did it.
Yeah.
I've been to Hopkins.
Yeah, because I love Hopkins. I'm a huge fan.
I know one of the former managers.
I used to work with the owner, Chad Hopkins, years ago.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And that was that doing food stuff, or?
Yeah, that was doing food stuff. It was when I was working at Whole Foods when I moved back up here to Salt Lake from St. George after Vegas.
Got it.
I was working at Whole Foods. He was my boss, and we'd hang out in his garage drinking homebrew.
Yeah. Talking
about different flavor profiles, different ways to brew beer, different ways to make beer.
A way a lot of that starts.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You find a hobby that you like, and you find a way to make it a career. The problem is when people turn their hobby into a career, they don't like doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Because they have to do it. And Chad Hopkins has found amazing people to work with him. So he's focusing more on building the business and doing the business and less on how to do the business.
I feel like a lot of people, when they go from hobby to profession, forget that there's all the other aspects of business to it, that weren't there.
Yep.
That is what, like, they got into it because of the thing they like, not realizing that, like, there's 75% of what you have to do isn't the fun stuff.
Right.
And, like, I try to explain that to younger photographers that are, like, talking about going full-time. I'm like, just so you're aware, 10% of your time is actually out shooting and doing the fun stuff.
Yep.
The rest of it is business, bookkeeping, marketing, editing, like, not nearly as glamorous as, like, I get to go to all these places.
Right. Yeah. Yes, you get to go to all those places, but you're also spending a very, very small amount of time doing the thing you love.
Right.
That's I ran a couple restaurants, a couple bakeries, and I was very rarely in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I was normally in the office.
Yeah.
I was doing inventory, I was doing ordering, I was doing scheduling and payroll.
Yeah.
And in some cases, the only time I was in the kitchen was when somebody called out.
Yeah.
But that also meant that I had to do twice the amount of work.
Yep.
Because I still had to do my job, but I also had to do that job.
Yeah. I think it's one of the things that, especially as, like, creative worlds expand, the person at the top still wants to go do the thing in the field, but it actually hurts because they can't do the job.
Yeah.
The job
or they're
isn't in the
spending
field.
more time coming in on a day off, coming in early, staying late,
Right.
doing the other stuff that they were supposed to do.
Right.
And a lot of times in food service, you have to place your orders by a certain time, otherwise you
That's
don't
true.
get it.
Yeah.
So it's like, there were times I would literally have my laptop sitting next to me
Yeah.
while I've got my knife over here.
Yeah.
And, I'm, doing some prep work, washing my hands, placing orders.
Yeah.
Washing my hands, doing prep work, washing my hands, placing orders.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way to do it.
Totally.
You don't take a break, you place your orders.
As someone who doesn't work in food service now, what is a food that you still love making?
So I was really big into baking and pastry. That was the route that I was more leaning towards.
Okay.
I went to culinary school sort of as a backup
Yeah.
in case pastry didn't work.
Yeah.
But I still love doing desserts. I still love doing cookies. My grandma and I, ever since I was a little kid, we used to make Christmas cookies together. We'd get together a couple weeks before Christmas. Sometimes we got together 2 to 3 times a year to make a certain type of cookie. Because it tastes better the longer it sits. And so we'd get together all the time and make cookies. And when I was in the Navy, I actually came home one year right before Christmas, and we baked cookies for Christmas together.
Is there one cookie that's, like, your fondest memory with your grandma?
There's one, it's an Italian waffle cookie. It's called a pizzelle or a pizzelle, depending on who you talk to. It's probably my favorite, like, flavor and texture of cookie, and the fact that at the time we could only make 2 at a time. But we were making hundreds of cookies because everyone loved them.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those, I swear my grandma ate more dough than cookies we made. And it was, we made the dough by hand because her mixer wasn't strong enough, and then her other mixer was too strong.
Of course.
There's actually a picture of us when I was really little, sitting on my grandma's lap, mixing cookie dough by hand. And so when I came home that one time from the Navy, we recreated that picture.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm sitting on my grandma's lap, and you can't see her behind me. You just see her hand sticking out behind me in the bowl.
Amazing.
Yeah, the pizzelle is probably one of my favorite cookies. Just the memories I have of making it with her, making sure the dough ball is not too big but not too small.
Yeah.
Eating the ones that were screwed up, eating the ones that weren't.
Hey, you gotta eat the mess ups.
You're right. You gotta try it. You gotta make sure it's good. That's probably one of my favorite cookies to make with my grandma. And when she passed, I actually got that pizzelle iron that she had. That my mom bought it for her back in the 70s, and it still works.
I mean, anything built before 1985, I feel like, is indestructible.
Seriously, I mean, in the barbershop, we have a fridge from the 1930s that still works.
Yeah. Is it still, like, the same?
It's the same. I mean, it's been up. It's had some parts replaced, but it's the same.
But it's not like an overhaul where it's, like, modern inside.
No, it's still all the old stuff. That's actually our biggest power drain in the entire shop. Is that refrigerator?
That's hilarious.
And it has a freezer about the size of a shoebox.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of room inside that freezer, but it's stuff built before the 80s just lasts forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah. It's not power efficient.
No.
But
Right.
it will not die.
It will not die.
Yeah. I always laugh. Working in West and Central Africa, all their trucks are built differently. And it's built with the old adage of like, can you fix it with 6 wrenches?
Yeah.
And that's because if it breaks down on the side of the road, you have to be able to fix it because there's no one coming and there's no repair shop.
And
so you gotta have whatever. And like I feel like that's the same way with a lot of like old stuff is like you just need 6 wrenches and like a shop that might have that random part.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Cuba. They had the Cuban trade embargo that closed back in the 50s.
Yeah.
So they haven't been able to get new things in.
True.
They have converted a majority of their vehicles from the 50s to diesel fuel, because it's cheaper and easier to get.
Yeah.
But all of the cars are still the same.
The same bodies, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're also, because of the climate, like pristine.
Yeah.
You don't have rust out or anything.
No, yeah. I mean, you walk down any street in Cuba and it looks like a scene from 1950s America.
Wild.
Clothing is still the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they may have updated a few things, and you get T-shirts and jeans and stuff and cell phones, but you walk down any street in Cuba, particularly the main streets, and it looks like 1950s America because they haven't been able to update.
Wild.
So they've found a way to make their vehicles last a really long time.
Yeah.
And with the closing of the trade embargo a few years ago, it's still the same. Yeah. They were able to get new parts and new cars, but not many.
What's the point of changing it if it's all working?
Right.
Like, why spend the money?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially in a place like Cuba where there's not a lot of money.
And you don't have a lot of space either.
Right.
So like adding more and more stuff just creates clutter to an island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no way to get rid of it.
Totally.
You can't just throw an old car off the side of the
People would probably try.
Right.
Just drive it into the ocean.
Drive it into the ocean.
Oh man, wild. So when you came back to Salt Lake, what like made you go from food service towards barbering?
After 20 years in the industry, I sort of just got burnt out.
That's fair.
I wasn't liking it anymore. I wasn't having fun anymore.
Yeah.
I've always been a firm believer, if you don't like what you're doing, find something else.
Yeah.
And that's not just work. That's hobbies. That's people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
If there's just no way to fix the issue, do something else.
Yeah.
Before I changed careers into barbering, I had applied for so many different jobs. I got job offers at so many different places, and I said, thank you for the offer, but I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what's wrong with it? Is it the money? Is it this? Is it that? I said, I just don't think I want to cook anymore.
Yeah.
And I got off work one day. This was probably 2 months after I had just applied everywhere, and I had ridden my motorcycle to work that day, and I'm just standing out in the parking lot, just getting all my gear on, and something in my head said, just look for something else. Yeah. So I Googled hair schools near me.
Wild.
I went and checked out 2 of them, signed up at the second one, and started school 3 days later.
What got you interested in hair?
Well, when I left college, when I was 19, I had looked at going into hair at that point in time.
Okay.
My mom and I toured a few different hair schools in Salt Lake, surrounding areas, and it just, at the time, it was like, this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what I thought about hair school back in the late 1990s, why I would want to do it, what about the industry was intriguing.
Yeah.
But I was like, let's give this a try. And just at the time, it wasn't the right time.
Yeah.
So when I was in the Navy, we had guys that we had sent to barber school because we still had to get our haircut out to sea.
Totally.
And I had expressed interest into going to barber school, but there were other guys that were more senior to me that wanted to go, so they got to go.
Checks out.
So just kept cooking. And like I said, after 20 years, I was like, this just is not enjoyable.
Yeah.
And so I just said, let's check out hair school. And I've been doing hair now for 10 years. I've taught at a hair school. I'm a national educator for a men's grooming line. I was an educator for a shear company for about 2.5 years. I've traveled the country, I've traveled the world doing haircutting.
Wow.
And I've been a finalist in like 5 haircutting competitions. I've been on teams that have been finalists for haircutting. I've done hair on international stages in front of other educators, other barbers, other hairstylists.
And you cut a mean mohawk.
And I cut a mean mohawk. Cut a mean mohawk.
That's awesome. Now, do you feel like the education part of it stems back to what we were talking about earlier of like creating a better holistic ecosystem of like not only like being around the people at your level and above, but like also bringing the people that are newer in?
I think so. One of the first times I was actually on stage in front of an international crowd, I had only been doing hair for like 4 years at that point in time. And I got that opportunity because I had entered a hairstyling competition. One of the promoters, the people that put on that competition, saw my work, looked up my Instagram, looked me up, and invited me to come out to do hair with them. I had never met these people.
Yeah.
It was in the stage presence was in Las Vegas.
Okay.
I walked through a casino until I found the right room that I was supposed to go to.
That's wild.
And we did a little introduction around the room with everybody, and there were people who had been doing hair for 20 years and 40 years, and the guy that was in charge was actually on a haircutting competition show back in the 2000s called Sheer Genius.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yeah. And a few of the people that I actually worked with that day were also on the show with him. But meeting all of these people that have been doing hair for decades, and then me doing hair for only 4 years, they're like, and I'm a barber, not a stylist.
Yeah.
Just trying to expand my knowledge of the industry.
Yeah.
By doing something completely different.
Do you feel like barbering and hairstyling have kind of sort of merged over the last like 15 years?
I mean, I think so.
As styles and trends change?
I think so, because there's also a lot more people that are getting hair that's different than the norm.
Yeah.
At my shop, we don't offer men's haircuts and women's haircuts. We do long hair and short hair.
That makes sense.
And that's a thing that's really changing globally within the industry, is not charging for your gender.
Yeah.
Because men, women, and everyone in between have long hair. Men, women, and in between have short hair.
Well, and long hair is a different time suck than short hair. And
Right. It takes longer to cut different things.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that it's utilizing the balance between styling and like cosmetology versus barbering. It's the same thing. It's just a lot shorter.
That makes sense.
A common haircut. I mean, not a common haircut anymore, thank God. But like the stacked A-line bob, that Karen haircut. Yeah. It's shorter to longer in different degrees.
Yeah.
Your haircut is shorter to longer in different degrees. It's
Yeah.
shorter over the ears. It's longer as you come up to the crown. Same thing with long haircuts. It's shorter to longer. Sometimes you just flop it on a different head.
Yeah.
So I think we can use any type of haircutting technique, no matter what the length of the hair is.
That makes sense.
It just depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, that's fair. And when you approach a new client, what are you trying to like get out of them as you're like trying to figure out what they're really looking for?
The first thing I look at, especially as it comes to long hair, but really in general, is how much time do you want to spend on your hair in the morning? Are you the type that's a wash and go, no matter the length of your hair?
Yeah.
Do you wash and go? Do you style? What types of products do you use? But then also, what are your hobbies?
Yeah.
Are you commonly pulling your hair up?
Yep.
Do you work out? Do you like to get the bangs out of your face?
Are you wearing helmets?
Are you wearing helmets? Do you wear a shirt and tie?
Yeah.
There's so many things. Do you wear high collars? There's so many things that go into the haircut and style that would work best for the person based off of their life outside. If you're going to pull your hair up a lot, you're obviously going to want something that's going to be able to pull back.
Yeah.
Or like in your case, can you put a helmet on?
Yeah.
Without choking you?
Yes.
So,
True fro is real.
right. That curly poofy hair will definitely choke you with a helmet on.
It does, especially ski helmets because they don't have as much venting.
Right. So there's a lot of things that goes into the ideal haircut for a person that really is fully dependent on how much time they want to style their hair and what their hobbies are.
And I don't think anyone actually thinks about that.
I don't think so. When we ask, how often do you work out? Do you pull your hair up? Or do you have kids?
Yeah.
Especially somebody with longer hair. If you have kids, they're going to reach for that hair and they're going to pull.
Yeah.
Do you want it to be out of their way? Do you want to be able to pull it back so they can't?
Yeah.
But even, hobbies, or your work, do you work with your hands? Do you look down a lot? Do you look up a lot? Do you look straight ahead at a computer? Do you wear glasses?
Yeah.
So many things can change the consultation of the haircut.
Yeah.
Based off of just what you do outside.
Yeah. I've never actually thought about it in that way, but that makes sense.
But then we also get a lot of guys that say, my wife sent me this picture, and it's Chris Hemsworth. Or Ryan Reynolds. And I'm like, hate to break it to you, dude. Your wife wants Chris Hemsworth or Ryan Reynolds. I can give you that haircut, but it's not going to make you look like them. But also, you're thinning a lot on top. I cannot give you that haircut.
Right.
We even get a lot of moms that come in. Now, this is Utah, so we're getting white blonde kids that bring in pictures of Latino kids, and they say, give us that haircut. And
it's not going to look the same.
It's not going to look the same.
Yeah.
If I take your kid's hair that short on the side, it's going to look like they're bald all the way up to the side of their head, even though I'm only cutting half of the side of their head down to 0.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm not doing a straight razor fade on a kid.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put a razor up against his skin.
That makes sense.
It's not going to happen. So it's there's a lot that goes into talking to the people about their haircut to make it look the way they want it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. And you mentioned earlier motorcycles.
Yes.
How long have you been interested in motorcycles and riding motorcycles and things like that?
Yeah. I got my motorcycle license when I was 23. I was in the Navy at the time, and I had come home on leave around my birthday. And my dad had gone through a midlife crisis, so he bought himself a motorcycle.
Yes.
And then
that parental midlife crisis that gets you benefiting.
Love it. It's great because it helps me out with my future. So he bought himself a motorcycle, and then he bought another bike for the rest of us to learn how to ride on.
Got it.
So when I came home on leave, my parents had paid for my birthday the motorcycle rider's course.
Oh, sweet.
So I took that. It was like Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday.
Yeah.
And then went and took the written test Monday morning and got my license. And I've been riding pretty much ever since.
Nice.
I've had probably more motorcycles since 2003 than I've had cars since I was 16.
That's hilarious.
And sometimes it's just, I need a bigger bike.
Yeah.
That's really all it comes down to, is I need something bigger, I need something faster, I need something that can go more.
Yeah.
Especially now
What type of bikes do you normally like?
I go more into the cruisers.
Okay.
I've never been a fan of street bikes, of the speed bikes or crotch rockets.
Yeah.
Mostly because I know that if I ride one, I will kill myself. I will go too fast, too quickly. I will
That's good self-awareness.
do something wrong.
Yeah.
And it's going to hurt me or other people. But on a cruiser, they say it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah.
So it's getting there is the fun part, not getting there.
Yeah. And you always talk about doing like big group rides where it's just like more about spending time with people and going out and doing things for a day.
Oh, absolutely. Some of my favorite activities are just texting friends or, just setting up a ride and just going, not really knowing where I'm going.
Yeah.
But I also believe that motorcycle riding is the cheapest form of therapy that you will ever find. Once the bike is paid off, it's the cheapest form of therapy. While you're paying it off, it's a whole nother story. But, even when I lived 5 minutes away from work, if I had a bad day at work, just that 5-minute ride home just cleared my mind.
Yeah.
Just the wind through the hair got rid of all my troubles. But if I was having a bad day, I would just keep riding.
That's fair.
Especially when I worked in bakeries. You get off work at 3 in the afternoon.
Yep.
what better time to go on a motorcycle ride than when the sun is already at its highest peak and it's starting to cool down. I've gone an hour, I've gone 2 hours.
Oh, yeah.
I've filled up my gas tank 3 times on these rides just to clear my mind.
Yeah.
And
sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do.
Right? It took all day, but I got home and I was relaxed and I was calm, and all my troubles seemed to go away on the road.
When I lived in Taiwan, I lived like right in the middle of Taipei, which was the first time being from upstate New York that I had lived in a major city.
Mm-hmm.
And going from being able to drive wherever for as long as I wanted to not having a car and only taking mass transit, one of the things I missed most was bad day, jumping in the car, windows down, through fields, and you just nothing but the sound of the engine and the nature outside.
Absolutely.
Nothing compares.
That's the bike I ride now is the first bike that I've had any type of like speaker system on.
Yeah.
And so before that, it was just listening to what's happening.
Yeah.
Now I get to listen to what's happening with music, which makes it even better,
What's your favorite genre of music?
Oh, that's a really tough one. I mean, being a theater kid, musical theater is one of those playlists that I've got always. Okay. And that's really... Those days that I'm listening to musical theater are those bad days.
You just need it to like boost you up a little.
Right. I just need to forget what adulting is like for a minute and go back to high school.
That makes sense.
And college when, it was like the bills that I had to pay was my food bill for for the commissary. But I mean, I still have musical theater on there, but I've always been a fan of jazz and blues music. My brother has been in a blues band for quite a long time.
Do they play here?
They have. There was, I think their bassist. He died recently, and I don't remember exactly how. So they've had a really hard time replacing him.
Got it.
Not finding another bassist, but they've had a hard time replacing the person.
Yeah.
Because he was in that group for a long time with all of them.
A bassist, especially in like a jazz blues situation, an instrument player is not just an instrument player.
Right.
It's very much about feel, vibe, interaction with the other bandmates. I feel way more than a lot of other genres of music. It's very much about how you play off each other in those two genres.
That's exactly right. Because you can have somebody just come in, but it's not going to feel the same.
Right.
Because you don't know them, and they don't know you.
Yeah.
So they haven't played in a while, but I do have a CD that they put out years ago, and that one, I love to put that in. But jazz and blues music are definitely some of my favorites. But I'm also really big into rockabilly, and you give me that old country, the Johnny Cash and the Waylon Jennings and the Tanya Tucker and the Wanda Jackson, but then give me the old crooners, the Rat Pack. Give me Sammy Davis Jr. and Fred Astaire and Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
Then, into B.B. King. Give me that good soul.
Yeah.
Aretha Franklin. Give me that. Give me the old country when it's story music. The entire song is a story that they're telling.
Yeah.
Jolene by Dolly Parton.
Dude, I was actually talking with my partner about this last night, that at this point, I feel like Dolly Parton could put out an entire full-length album of just Jolene performed by other artists that she has given permission to go out and record Jolene.
Oh, absolutely.
And it would be a magnificent album of vastly different renditions of that song.
I mean, you look at two of the most recent ones. Miley Cyrus, who is Dolly Parton's goddaughter.
Yes.
So we'll give her that. But then Lil Nas X.
Yeah.
He did a cover of Jolene recently, and it's fantastic. I think the Dolly Rots, a women's or all-female rock. How would you even describe it? Rock punk. They did a cover of Jolene. I think it was the Dolly Rots, and just it's so completely different, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But a completely different feel.
Yeah.
To it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I completely agree. You could get anybody to do Jolene.
Yeah.
and you can't go wrong.
No.
I mean, maybe Nickelback.
Let's not even bring that one into the ethos. Let's just let that one disappear.
Yeah, you give me the old music that is a story.
Yeah.
Those ones I love. I mean, even Earl's Gotta Die by the Chicks, that's a great one. Okay. And then you get to the new country where it's...
Oh, yeah,
or just new music in general. It's pop music. And I blame pop country on Garth Brooks. He was one of the first country musicians to put synthetic music, to put synthesized music into country music, and because of him we have modern country.
Yeah.
I mean, just Daft Punk with a twangy guitar.
Right.
Yep. But then you've got Beyonce now doing country, so who really knows what's going to happen with country music. I think she just needed a change, and she wanted to be on the top of a different chart, which she made it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it didn't matter what chart she went on to.
Doesn't matter. But even Dolly Parton did a rock album recently, and she was at the top of the rock album. But the only reason why she did a rock album was because she was asked to be indicted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And she's like, I don't do rock music. I do country music.
That's funny.
And they were like, yeah, but it's like close.
Adjacent.
It's adjacent. You're like on the same level. And she's like, but it's not rock music.
Yeah.
So she did a rock album. So she can then feel comfortable. Now, she did turn it down a couple years ago, and I'm pretty sure she'll be asked again.
I mean,
but it's Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton is one of those humans that needs to be protected at all costs.
Oh, she's a national treasure.
Yes.
I mean,
everything she's done for education and children's life
children's literacy.
Yeah.
Even like at Dollywood, her amusement park, every single employee from day one, whether they're part-time, full-time, seasonal, they get benefits, medical, dental, vision, and they get college reimbursement.
Yeah.
And it's huge. Even if you're only seasonal, you can still get the college reimbursement year-round.
That's wild.
As long as you come back the next year.
Yeah, as long as you're still working.
So she is fully for the education of people, and specifically where Dollywood is. Yeah. It's not that great of an education area.
No. It's not one of the well-rated areas for education.
Right, for primary or secondary.
Yeah.
So getting people into college in that area is a big thing.
Yeah, I mean,
to help build the economy in the area.
That's one of the things that is part of why I started the podcast. Is I've realized that people want three basic things. They want their basic needs met: food, water, shelter, healthcare. They want their kids to have a better education than they had, and they want joy in life.
Right.
And that's basically the same thing. Is how does that look to different people? Right. Yeah. And speaking of kids, your work with Bikers Against Child Abuse.
Yes.
Let's dig into that a little bit because
it's
one of the things that I find so fascinating about you is that you have all of this different things that you've done, but also you still find ways to give back to the next generation, even though you don't have kids, to my knowledge.
I do not.
Yeah. So how did you get involved with the organization, and what is it that you guys do?
Yeah. So Bikers Against Child Abuse is an organization that our main goal is to help children not be afraid of the world in which they live. There's so many things that happen to a kid when they've been abused that they don't know who to trust anymore, but also how to find fun, how to find being a kid again, because so much is taken away from a person when they're abused, especially at that age. They just don't know where to go. Yeah. We do that through so many ways. It's predominantly it's all through fundraising. We are a 501c3 organization in the U.S. We're actually in 48 states and 17 different countries. And I believe we're currently working on at least 3 more countries. Currently,
what are the 2 states you're not in?
Hawaii and I can never remember what the other one is. I can look it up.
But you're in Alaska?
Yeah, we do have a chapter in Alaska. We're in every province in Canada. I know we're currently working on Mexico. That's one of the countries that we're working on getting in. The first country outside of the U.S. was actually Australia.
Interesting.
So yeah, and now
motorcycles are very common down there. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I can see the synergy of that.
Yeah. Yep. So we help the kids in a lot of ways. Some things that we do with them and for them is we'll go to court with them. If the kid has to testify, they usually ask all witnesses to leave the courtroom because they don't want this person's testimony to affect that person's testimony.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And a majority of the time, witnesses are family members.
Yeah.
So when a kid is in a courtroom and they have to testify,
they don't have anyone.
They don't have anyone.
Yeah.
The only person that they know, and typically, is like 80% of child abuse cases are perpetrated by someone they know and that they trust. A family member, an educator, a counselor, a clergy member, someone in the community that they're familiar with, because it's easy for those people to break in and to get the trust. And for lack of a better term, because this term is being thrown around wildly across the U.S., is grooming that kid to accept what's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
So we go to court with them, and when they're testifying, there's their lawyer, who they know a little bit, but there's someone that's asking them a ton of questions.
Yep.
There's another lawyer that's asking them a ton of questions and trying to make everything they say out into a lie.
Yes.
There's their perpetrator, the person that abused them, and then there's a judge sitting above them, staring down at them, wearing all black.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had to testify in court, but it's very intimidating for anyone,
100%,
especially a child.
Yes.
So
I didn't have to do it as a kid, but I've had to go to court multiple times as a business owner.
Right. And it's scary.
Yeah.
Even as an adult, it's very, very scary to be in that situation.
Yeah.
So when we get involved with the kids, we will go to their house or we'll go to a park nearby them, and we will introduce ourselves. We'll hang out with them. We bring them a bunch of things, but we bring them like a biker vest that's like ours that
cool.
They pick. We have a few patches that they can pick to put on their back, similar to ours that we wear. We let them pick a road name.
Yeah.
Similar to ours. So, and when we discuss that child in any capacity, we never use their real name. I don't even know most of their real names. I just know the road name that they picked.
Yeah.
And it could be anything from unicorn farts to Rocky to Fire Dragon, Stitch.
Yeah.
Baby Yoda, there's so many different names.
Oh, yeah.
We just let these kids pick something that sits with them, that
when
they're
I lived in
comfortable with.
Taiwan, I taught English as a substitute teacher, and all of the kids would pick an English name for their English school.
Yeah.
And it was similar to like all sorts of Disney names and like
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Similar concept.
Yeah, we've got tons of Ariels.
Yeah.
It's just so we just let them pick a name that they're comfortable with that we then use for them.
That's their association.
Their association with our organization.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But we go to court with them, and so when we're in court, they can look out amongst the group and they know people there.
Yeah.
And they're comfortable with us.
Yeah.
And so they feel comfortable retelling their story, which we don't know their story up until that point.
Totally.
Most of the time we have no idea what happened to this kid.
Yep.
All we know is that they were abused.
Yep.
And that's all we need to know.
Right.
It's all we need to know.
I feel like that's probably better for the kid because it's one less time they're having to relive the trauma.
Right. But it's also better for us because then we don't...
You're not carrying the guilt.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a survivor's guilt type thing. But it's also really, really hard to sit in that courtroom and hear what happened to these kids.
That's fair.
It's really, really hard to hear this. So that's one of the biggest things that we do in order to help these kids. But we also help with therapy if there's any way we can. Every chapter of Bikers Against Child Abuse across the country, across the world, has a therapist that works in the organization within the chapter. They're not members of the organization, but they're a therapist that we've vetted. Of course, we've looked up their background, make sure they have no abuse in their in their history. But then a lot of them volunteer their time. So a lot of them will do pro bono work for us or for the kids if they need it. If they can't, they find someone else that can.
That's rad.
But then there's also play therapy, there's sports therapy, there's music therapy. We've paid for karate lessons which is great for a kid.
Yeah.
But we've also paid for soccer camp or cheerleading camp, or we've bought musical instruments, or we've paid for musical lessons for the kids, and art classes. Just whatever the counselors and the therapists think that they need. If they can't get it, we will help them find a way to get it.
That's
and
awesome.
A lot of times that's through grants and community programs as well.
Awesome.
So we work very, very deeply within the community to help these kids and the families of the kids to be able to get what the kids need to be a kid again.
Yeah, to move past the trauma.
Yeah. One of our big sayings is breaking the chains of abuse. I think it's 70% of people in the prison system who are there for being an abuser were themselves abused.
That makes sense.
So if we can help one kid not continue on that trajectory, we've done our job. Yeah. So that's the big thing we do. We work with local law enforcement. We work with police, FBI, just anyone to be able to help kids that need it. We go to court on a regular basis, but we also get relationships with local law enforcement. So if they see or hear of a kid that has been abused, if they go on a call, then they can potentially give the parents our card.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Same with lawyers, same with counselors, child advocates, even doctors' offices, therapist offices, and community programs. Yeah. We even have our flyers at banks and restaurants and bakeries, just whatever. We put them out there. So
that's awesome.
If anybody knows anyone who needs, who can use our assistance, can use our help, it's available and open.
Awesome. It's rad.
Yeah.
In your ideal world, what does not just barbering, but like your community of Utah look like in 10 years?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to try to keep politics out of this one.
Perfect.
Try to keep politics out.
Yeah.
Because it's not a place for it. I would really like to see Utah, the state, and my local communities just be more open to helping those in need. Everyone says, I gave $1 to the homeless guy or whatever. And while that $1 is going to help, you also turned around and later that day said, oh, he probably just spent it on alcohol.
Yep.
And whether he did is not your...
Once you gave him the dollar,
it's your dollar. He can do what he wants with it. But if we look more into helping those around us and helping your community, whether it be by volunteering at the library or picking up trash on the side of the street, or just being there as an open ear for anyone, someone comfortable enough to talk to. I think the whole world would be better if we just looked at other people and looked up at them instead of looking down upon them. The only time you should look down at someone is if you're helping them back up.
That's a good way to put it.
And I really think that if we just all looked outside of our reflection in our phone and looked just slightly past that, then it could be a better world for everyone. Not just what I need, but what other people need.
Yeah. Awesome. That's it. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Puck has been my barber for over a year, and I thought that I was starting to get to know him until we sat down for this conversation, and wow, it was an even more interesting conversation than I expected, which I knew going in was going to be a really interesting conversation. Probably one of the most diverse humans I know and I have the pleasure of knowing. Thanks for coming onto the podcast yet again, Puck. I appreciate you, and I am looking forward to my next haircut so we can chat more. Be sure you guys are subscribed on your platform of choice where you want to listen. Our next episode is going to be a fantastic one. Her name is Elisha Butler. She runs a foundation. She started a foundation that is helping prevent teenage suicide stemming from some personal life experiences in her life. She is awesome. One of those people that I met here in Utah by chance, and I am very thankful that I did get the opportunity to meet her. So be sure you're subscribed and listen in next week. Have a great week. See you guys next time.